I'm going to close the door once you start so that there's no.
Start.
Okay. My name is Anthony Correa. Today is April 13th of 2021, and the current time is 9:07 a.m. This interview is being conducted virtually and recorded. I am interviewing Dale Stark, who was born on the 21st of June in 1930 in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and served in the Korean War between 15th of January 1951 between the 14th of January 1955. Dale Stark was a staff sergeant in the Air Force and served as a specialized VL mechanic. This interview is sponsored by the Bell Tower Memorial. And we can begin the interview. Firstly, sir, what were you doing before you entered the service?
I worked as an automobile mechanic for a General Motors dealer here in Waukesha. Chevrolet dealer.
And did you always want to be a specialized vehicle mechanic? Like while you were in high school, you automatically knew you wanted to, or was this an interest that developed?
Well, myself, I was a farm boy, grew up on a farm, and when something broke, we fixed it, okay? Like I learned to weld when I was 14 years old. I learned to drive when I was about 6 years old, like that, you know. The specialized vehicle mechanic, well, I did my basic training at Truex Field in Madison, and I was mechanic there. And after about 6 months there, the first sergeant asked me if, he said, "You're a pretty good mechanic." He said, "We could give you a stripe and make you a specialized vehicle mechanic." And I said, "Oh, fine. Yeah, a stripe, you know, and that's more money too, you know." And so I got the stripe, but then about a month later, they say, "Hey, we need that classification in Korea." So he had a plan.
Yeah.
So that's Korea as a specialized vehicle mechanic.
So before you went to Madison to train and got enlisted for the stripe, were you always interested in serving Korea, or was it your choice in the first place?
No, I had no idea. You know, just enlist and you take what you get. Sure.
Yes, sir.
A lot of my friends just stayed at Madison. They never went overseas.
But because you got that special stripe, and because you were,
They needed that classification. They needed that skill in Korea to work on special vehicles.
Okay, sir. So you went to Madison for your early weeks of training, and there you learned to adapt to military life?
Yes.
You want to expand on that, please? Like what was the process like?
Well, I was in a barracks with 4 other men in my room. And what was the experience like? Well, you had to make your own bed. They'd inspect it, and if there's a wrinkle in the blanket, you get hollered at. And you'd have to do it over again and things like that. So, but you know, it was your basic training is more of taking orders, no matter what they are, you know, and paying attention to what's going on.
Getting up early for PT in the morning, sir?
Pardon me?
Getting up early in the morning for PT, sir?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. And then you get your military shots, you know, so you're vaccinated for everything. And of course, we talk about vaccinating today. And, but I recall I stood in line, I got 8 shots in this arm, one right after the other.
Wow.
Things. Yeah.
Doesn't sound comfortable at all. So would you consider your role for your specialized skill in Korea your most important contribution while you were there?
Yes.
And while you were stationed in Korea, is this really all you did with that skill? You just would mostly focus it in Korea?
I would say so. Yeah, basically, that's all I did. Well, uh, yeah, one other thing I thought was kind of interesting, we had a railroad crossing. You come into our base,
Mhm.
and one of our vehicles got hit by a train.
Mm.
I got killed on it, but there were no signals, no crossing signals or lights or anything like that. So I and the commander out on the railroad track and did some
Mm.
insulating and took some bolts apart on the track, and we made it so that when the train went across the track, it would close the circuit and light a light and make it flash. And I thought that was kind of interesting
That is
You-
very interesting.
here in America, but
Mhm.
bothered us there. Mhm.
A big difference in Korea is that it's not as developed, right, sir, while you were there?
Well, it was not. No, I never saw anything other than a gravel road or mud road.
Mhm.
Uh, the only form of transportation, civilian transportation, was like a school bus,
Mhm.
speak. But instead of having glass windows, they had like half-inch square chicken wire on the windows. And then the bus was full of people and people sitting on the roof and hanging on the bumper. But that was their transportation. The only automobiles I ever saw were military automobiles.
Mm.
There was no such thing as an automobile, a Korean automobile. Today, I think they're one of our largest manufacturers of automobiles. How it's changed.
Mhm. Mhm. And this wasn't just seen in cars, right? While you were, I'm sure you were stationed in Korea, it was just generally very different than the culture here in the US.
Well, okay, so I was in the 8th Fighter Bomber Wing, and
Mhm.
our airplanes were F-80s. That's a fighter bomber. So it
Okay.
had capabilities as of maneuvering for fighting and for bombing. And we were the division or the outfit I was with, they called the hobos. We were like 8 miles from the front line, and we would get driven back often, and then so we'd move a lot. But our
Mhm.
F-80 bombers, we would carry 4 200-pound bombs. By
Mm.
doing so, they eliminated the fuel tanks because the short distance, they didn't need the fuel. So they put bombs in place of the fuel tanks. And they would fly napalm and bombs to the front lines and back. And
Mhm.
our outfit did 400,000 missions.
Wow.
Yeah. Mhm.
I'm sure you were a very significant part of that whole process and 400,000 listeners.
Well, and then I can probably show you some of these pictures here. Let's see. Like I said, I worked, that's our living quarters. You see me?
Uh-huh.
You
I see it.
see how muddy it is? I'm
Yeah,
in mud. Uh, there's a tank that got damaged. Can, can you
I
see?
can see it.
Let's see, what else do we have here? That's an aircraft where we had to protect our airplanes if the enemy planes came over, the anti-aircraft,
Mhm.
what that is. There's one of the buses, like I described to you, how it's,
With the chicken wire.
yeah.
Mhm.
This is, let's see, what is this here? That's a weapons carrier, that vehicle there. And like I said, I was a specialized vehicle mechanic, and those are special vehicles, like a weapons carrier and a tank and wreckers, fire engines, things like that.
Mhm. So your work expanded past airplanes and also dipped into specialized vehicles like APCs and tanks.
Right.
And
Yeah. There's a plane that they shot down. It's a F-86,
Mm.
burnt out. Um, there's some Korean ladies walking up the muddy side of the river, carrying their clothes on their head, and they would wash the clothes in the creek
Mhm.
without any tide or bleach or anything.
Because it was a different experience than here in the States.
Right. Now here, this picture here, as you can see, that's cave people that live in a cave.
Mhm.
Can you see their homes,
I can.
the side of the mountain?
Mhm.
Mhm. See, what else do we have here?
So, oh, wow. Wow.
That,
Yeah.
there's another tank. Yeah. So the and then I was not in hand-to-hand combat. I was not didn't have that type of duty.
Mhm. Because yours was specifically orientated on, well,
Support.
engineering and support. Yes.
Mhm.
Mhm. Did you ever take leaves from Korea, sir?
I would go what they'd call rest and recuperation. I would get to go from Korea back to Japan
Mhm.
every 60 days, 30 or 60 days, I don't remember. Yeah.
Mhm.
A 3-day rest and recuperation.
Could you please expand on your experience while you were in Japan?
Well, when you rest and recuperate, we have a lot of fun.
I understand, sir.
Farther than that.
I understand. Is there any special moments that stand out while you were in Korea, sir?
Well, the probably one of the interesting things is we had the barracks here that we lived in, again,
Mhm.
had what we call houseboys, and they're little Korean guys. I don't know how old they were. I mean, they were probably 16, 18,
Mhm.
whatever. But they would help keep the barracks clean, things like that, which is
Mhm.
they were very, I had a picture of I was there in 1951, and in talking about vehicles again, I had a picture of a 1951 Buick,
Mhm.
and I showed that picture to him, and he said, "That's a car?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "There is such a thing like that? Really?" He said, "That's what it is." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I never saw anything like," well, of course, he didn't speak very good English, but he said, "I've never seen anything like that before."
Very different aspect than, I'm sure.
Uh, and then, of course, we had one of the kind of interesting things is we had what we call Bed Check Charlie.
Mhm.
And there were being that we're so close to the front lines, um, we had our anti-aircraft protecting our base.
Mhm.
It would come with a lightweight plane that could fly at low altitude,
Okay.
and they would our radar would pick up this small plane, which could possibly have some type of demolition on it,
Mhm.
And so then all the sirens would go off because no one knew for sure what it was. So then, of course, that was probably the most disturbing thing is you had to get out of your bed and go in a foxhole because nobody knew for sure what it was.
Yeah.
And of course, it turned out to be Bed Check Charlie. He would just disturb us so we didn't get a good night's sleep.
Mm.
But then I say, get out of your bed. Our beds were these canvas, wooden leg canvas. You know what I'm saying?
I get it, sir.
And then I had a sleeping bag that I paid $5 from the guy that left before me. And I think he bought it from the guy that left before him. But it sure was comfortable.
I paid $5 for it and it keeps coming back. I'm sure it was, sir.
I sold it for $5 when I left.
Oh, that's great, sir. So was there a huge celebration for when you reached that huge milestone for the number of missions that were conducted?
Yes, there was. Yeah. Yeah, there was. Mhm.
Mhm. And I'm sure you remember this experience, sir. And if you could,
Well, it wasn't really a celebration, but a lot of publication, you know.
mm,
And
a lot of-
probably more so celebrated by the pilots than myself, you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
I supported them and they were the ones that were flying the missions.
Mhm. Like you said earlier, it was more of a support role in making sure that they could fly those planes.
Right, yeah, and I say the vehicles that I supported that with were fire engines and uh, tugs, which they called tugs. They would pull the airplanes around the airstrip
Mhm.
when they weren't started up to get them in line to take off.
Mhm. So while you were in Korea, sir, do you have any long-lasting friends while you served that you still talk to?
I had some, but they're all gone.
Hmm.
Here's something that's kind of interesting when you leave the United States and
Mm.
to Japan, you cross the 180th meridian. That's
Mhm.
the date line.
Wow.
So it depends, I guess, which way you're going. It's either a day earlier or a day later.
Mhm.
Kind of interesting. Then we got this certificate.
And that's while you left Korea, sir?
Uh, either way, whatever way you're.
Oh, either way, yes.
And in
Okay.
this particular ship I was on, they gave us a certificate going over, I believe it was, yeah.
Mhm. Certificates. After Korea, and you started to make the transition from civilian life, especially after getting a certificate like that, what was it like, sir?
To transfer from military to civilian.
Yes, sir.
I guess, yeah, it probably took a month or two until I found out what I wanted to do for a living, you know.
Mhm.
And I tried a couple different jobs and then finally settled with a job that I stayed with for 38 years. Mhm.
And what'd you settle on, sir?
Working for General Electric Company
Mhm.
uh, on a power delivery equipment like power generation, steam turbines, and generators, compressors, transformers, circuit breakers, that kind of stuff.
Mhm. Everything related to that. And did you ever miss your time while in Korea, sir?
Well, I don't miss it because I was very fortunate.
Mhm.
Sure, there are a lot of men that spend time in Korea that uh, don't miss it at all. You know what I'm saying? But
Yes, sir.
yeah, it was an experience, and I think it was a good thing for me. Of course, I was only 20 when I went there,
Mhm.
and I think it helped me grow up, really.
Mhm. And you'd say that's one of the life lessons you learned while you were in the service, sir?
Pardon me?
And that's one of the life lessons you've sort of learned, or there are more life lessons you learned while in the service?
Well, I guess you could say that, yeah. Mhm.
Mhm. So when you returned home and you said you had a transition from military to civilian life, what does that exactly mean, sir?
Well, I had to find a job, okay? Uh, and that was part of the transition. But, you know, I still belonged to the reserve when I got out of service. So we would have monthly meetings
Mhm.
with the Air National Guard. And I would go on summer maneuvers for, what was it, a couple of week tour duty.
Mhm.
So you kind of kept in contact. And of course, those friends, I made more friends there at home, being in the National Guard, than you were able to do it in Korea, you know.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And and you said if you had to choose, you would not go back, or would you experience it again?
It was a good experience, and it, it helps. Yeah, it was a good experience. An experience that you probably wouldn't do on your own, and probably it helped me grow up, you know.
Mhm.
And you learn a lot, and it was a educational experience, you might say, as well as a duty.
I understand, sir. And before you enlisted, did you ever feel like you had a calling for the service? Or
No,
again, was it more of that you didn't have a
never
choice?
thought much about it. The uh, uh, what happened? I was working at Dale Chevrolet at the time I went into service,
Mhm.
service manager. So back in those days, if you had a problem with your car, you'd bring it in, and the service manager would possibly even take it for a ride and tell you what was wrong with it, you know, but wouldn't charge you for it. But now they do. But then, and that was what I was doing. Well, then there was a captain in the Air Force National Guard came up to me one day and said, "Dale, what's your classification?" And I said, "I'm 1A. And I could get drafted any day." Well, they said, "Why didn't you join the Air National Guard?" Because we're going up to Truex Field. But we did our basic training at Billy Mitchell Field. So
Mhm.
kind of an interesting and easy way to get into the military, you know.
Mhm. Being recruited by a Air Force captain in the National or International Reserve, I'm sure was a smooth transition.
Yeah.
Was it? Mhm.
Yeah. So, you know, we, to go to Korea, I went on a troop ship from California.
Mhm.
Uh, I flew out from Milwaukee out to Camp Stoneman, which is north of San Francisco.
Mhm.
There we got on a troop ship, and the troop ship took us under the Golden Gate Bridge, which was kind of interesting to see. And then, of course, everybody on the ship, I don't know how large or how big a crew or, you know, people there were, but there were several hundred people.
Mhm.
And you were standing there watching various ones get sick from the seasick.
Seasick, yeah.
And that took me to Yokohama, Japan.
Mhm.
And from there, I went on a troop train to Fukuoka, which is southern Japan.
Mhm.
And it was a ex-Japanese troop train. So, and then it just had bunks in it. There were no seats. But then the bunks were like 2 feet too short because Japanese people are 2 feet shorter than most of us Americans, you know. So
Mhm.
feet stuck over in the other guy's bunk.
Mhm.
Uh, and there in Fukuoka in southern Japan is where they certified you to go over to Korea.
Mhm.
And I was there for several weeks, and then I flew on a troop, a ship or an airplane to Kimpo Air Force Base in Korea.
Mhm.
And from there, I got on a back of a truck, I and about 3 other guys, for about a 15-mile ride to Suwon, Korea.
Mm.
And then that's where I spent my tour of duty in Suwon, which
Before,
at that time was about, depending on where the front line was, you know, but the 38th parallel in that area.
Mhm. And well, I'm sure you didn't stay in one place for long because you were part of the Hobo division
Right.
and constantly moving around. Is there any message you leave for future generations, sir?
As far as the military,
Yes, sir.
serve your country, you know,
Mhm.
be loyal to your country. And, you know, that's important.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, sir. In closing, this has been an interview of Dale Stark regarding his service during the Korean War. My name is Anthony Carrillo. The time is 9:32 a.m. Thank you
Thanks.
for agreeing to this interview, and most importantly, thank you for your service, sir.
Thanks for your time. I can't hear you.
I think that hit the time benchmark.
Let's go just a little longer, Dale.
Oh, they want a little longer.
My mistake. The timer must have been off then.
Yeah, the weather, you know, as far as Korea, I think they're in longitude, what is longitude? The weather there is pretty much like Wisconsin, you know. It's cold in the winter and warm in the summer. And however, it was always muddy, always mud to walk through. And
I'm sure that made trying to get vehicles out or trying to repair them difficult at times.
very much so, yeah. And of course, you know, like if a vehicle like a Jeep, for example, if it needed a new muffler, tailpipe, or brakes, and you couldn't lay down underneath it because it's all mud,
Mhm.
take the battery out of it, tip it on its side. And we would work on it, just put the new muffler on and tip it back on its wheels again. And that, you know, so. And
Yep.
we had Korean guys that were helpers, but then they couldn't learn the language very well. But they would help us. So I remember one time I was doing some brake repairs on a truck, and I wanted the Korean guy to wash some parts off. And instead of washing them off with cleaner, he washed them off with water, and that didn't work, you know. Then there was another time we had a little fire going, and he thought he's going to throw water on it, and he threw alcohol on it. And different things like that happen, you know, but I didn't have any serious combat where I was at.
And was this the extent?
We would lose pilots and planes, you know, that.
Very difficult, sir. Was this the extent of your interaction with the Korean people, sir? Or do you have a little bit more?
That was pretty much on a day-to-day working thing, other than our houseboy that tried to keep things straight, you know. So that's about it.
Okay, sir. With your interaction with them.
Okay. Say goodbye. So Tony, I guess that covers things, and we'll say goodbye again.
Okay. In closing, this has been an interview of Dale Stark regarding his service during the Korean War. My name is Anthony Carrillo. The time is 9:36 a.m. Thank you for agreeing to this interview, and most importantly, thank you for your service, sir.
Thanks, Tony.